I'd like to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the East Central Independent School District Board of Trustees being held on June 20th, 2022, beginning at 5:30 at the Student Services Building. Madam Secretary, can we have a call to order, please?
Yes, sir.
Roll call.
Del Brazil, Ginger Friesenhorn,
Here.
Victor Garza.
Here.
Coach Mulkey,
Here.
Moni Presses. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We move on to item 3, prayer and pledge. Mr. Scott?
Please bow your heads. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to meet together. Please help us to come together to make this business reflect your kingdom. Breathe life into our ideas and decisions and help us to build a team that has love and respect at its heart. Lord, come give us the inspiration to be the best we can be. May we be a shining example of your goodness and truth. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a seat.
That will move on to public comment.
There are none.
There are no public comments.
No, sir.
Okay, right along. All right. Item 5, trustee work session, adjusting rapid growth. Mr. Scott?
Sir, Mr. President, trustees, a few items that I want to call your attention to in your miscellaneous packet. First of which is the long-range planning summary that was provided by PAZA at the updated demographic study that the community was invited to. If you'll recall from that particular document, the fact that we were able to change middle school boundaries this year and add some portables at tradition has bought us a little bit of time, particularly with junior highs. We're able to buy ourselves a couple of years, but as you can see, and as you recall, the growth continues to be accelerated. As many as 16 new subdivisions have broke ground since the demographic study a year and a half ago. And so as a result, you can see that the urgency as it relates to new facilities to address capacity is at an elementary level, that there needs to be some relief in the north, and that a school really needs to open in 23-24, which we know we're not going to be able to meet that timeline. And then a middle school, a third middle school in 26-27, and a ninth elementary school, which would be one in the south in 26-27. And then you can see as you get further into the study period, we start to have some additional elementary demands as well as high school capacity being reached. The other document, I just went ahead and printed a copy of the bond program, just in case during the conversation today you want to reference the scope of work that was in that project program. You'll recall that in the spring of last year, Mr. Constantino was here to provide the board an update of what the construction market looked like at the time. Very volatile, very unpredictable, and that there was substantial escalation that we could project if we had to push the projects further down the road. And so what we've done in addition since then is procured an additional piece of property on Greytown Road. We find that site is actually more optimal in terms of geography with respect to the rapid growth in the northwest sector. And so Carlos tonight will talk a little bit about that site. He's done his due diligence there and put together really all the pros for that site, and he wants to explain that to the board, as well as kind of a site plan, a rough site plan, just to make sure that we would be able to utilize that site. And then kind of go through the market and what that construction market's looking like now, the best that he could predict from a cost perspective, as well as kind of an overview of a timeline if we were to pass a bond in November, and assuming we're starting at this point in the conversation with all of the scope of work roughly that was still in the 2021 bond, is where the conversation is going to start with the community. And assuming that we needed to get that entire scope done and do our very best to meet these demands, he's going to show kind of a rough schedule of what that would need to look like in order to pull that off. And so following Carlos today will be Victor Quiroga from Specialized Finance, who will let us know our financial position and how a bond program would affect our taxpayer, depending on the total cost of that program. And so our intent today is to allow you guys to have a conversation with these gentlemen. And then on the 27th, we have invited the original bond planning committee as well as an expanded group from the community. I think we've got between 50 and 60 confirmations. We'll have very engaged citizens from all over the school district, from PTAs, from homeowners associations, from city councils, booster organizations. Really wanted to make sure that we got a really broad and diverse group in addition to the group that we already had last time, to digest all this information that you will today and any other information that you want to present to them on the 27th, to get some feedback and direction for the board's consideration at that point. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos Constantino from LPA.
I remembered what I was gonna ask you. They're clearing land right there off of 410, like right when you pass Sinclair to the right, if you're coming, where's 410? This way on 410? Do you know if that was part of the, or do you know if it's a subdivision? Like, was that part of the,
Are you talking going,
so you're going 410 south
You go on
and
the west side of 410, that's a subdivision.
so is that part of this?
it is included.
Okay, perfect,
It
thank
is,
you.
that one is included.
Okay.
Everybody see this? I'm gonna try and know how to get the full display of this
What's
PDF
a
format.
PDF, so I don't think,
Go to 100%.
yeah, you got
There you go.
100, there you go. And then you can drag the site.
And the little arrow.
The little arrow right there, click on that.
I think it's gonna move me that way.
There you go.
You know? Is it doable?
Yeah.
You think that's doable?
Yeah.
All right, let's try this. Okay, I'm sorry. Is the experts gonna come up here? I'm sorry. We'll try this. We'll see if it crops some things off. Board members, board president, Mr. Chiscano, again, good evening. We appreciate you letting LPA provide some information. I'm here again to, as Roland said, to provide some updated information in relation to the possible bond, and then also provide some information on the Greytown site. So the wheels are turning as far as the Greytown site. We've met with several utilities companies as well. CDS Murray's involved in relation to utilities. So I'm going to kind of jump into that and let y'all know kind of an updated schedule of what we're doing now at the Greytown site. So sort of get your bearings. I-10 is on the top going left to right, 1604 is on the bottom going up and down, and then you see the Greytown site, which is in red, okay? And then north is about 1:30, 2 o'clock. As far as the grading and plane of the site itself, again, north is top right going across. The grading runs more south to north, so it slopes down from south to north, which is going to be left to right. We also have a southeasterly breeze, which is going to be more coming from the bottom towards the top. And you'll look at how that's important in relation to the site layout. And then kind of our predicted layout, it's just preliminary. We're actually in the process right now of starting to design the detention pond. So we'll be required to provide a detention pond, which means that water, we need to hold water for a certain time frame before it extends into the adjacent property. So we're starting that in relation to the detention pond. And then you see the light blue, which is the floodplain. That is the under-year floodplain in relation to the site. We are not allowed to build roads or put a detention pond in the floodplain or a building, okay? Other than, the only thing you're allowed to do is put fields. The kids can play in the floodplain. You just can't put a building or put a detention pond or put roads in the floodplain itself. As far as, like Roland said, in relation to utilities, we do have water on site. The water is on the east side of Greytown Road, it's on the Greytown side. The only thing, it's a 6-inch line, And per our initial calculations, we will need a 12-inch line, and that will address fire and domestic water for the job site. So we're in the process of reviewing that right now to address, or getting the 12-inch water line in the project itself. And then sewer. This is the big thing. As you all are aware, Tradition has a sewer treatment plant. We met with the district, and we want to try to avoid that again, and we're going to be able to avoid that, which is nice. Per our view with the San Antonio River Authority, we will have sewer available on the north side of the campus. So they are building a new sewer treatment plant. I believe it's called New Martinez Sewer Treatment Plant. You can see that just below the 29A, and then they're going to run the sewer from the north and then go back west. And so we should have sewer hopefully by the end of 2024. We will see where that's at in relation to the schedule where we may be hopefully opening the new school in August of 2024. So we may have to do something in relation to pumping first until we can do a full tie into that utility. But the good news is we won't have a sewer treatment plant like we have at Tradition. So that's a big positive in relation to, and the cost relating to that as well. So that's a big positive in relation to this site. You can also tell the site itself is the light red area, and then you all are aware of the Katzer development. This is all the development that's going on now. I believe they're ready to turn dirt. And this is important because we also reached out to the gas company. One of the things per an evaluation that we did with talking to Julio and also Keith and Tom, John and Stevie is we want to provide gas to this as well. We could not get gas to Tradition. And that's important in relation to our mechanical units and our kitchen equipment. Gas is a lot more efficient, and it's just better in relation to maintenance. So we met with the gas company, and it looks like they're going to be able to provide gas to our meter for our site. So that is a big plus in relation to utilities for gas. So all of our mechanical equipment, rooftop units, and all of our kitchen equipment will now be gas instead of electric. Okay, so that is a huge hurdle as well in relation. So here is the initial layout. I do have a preface in relation to the building itself. So last August, we reached out to Mr. Toscano and we addressed that LPA wanted to review to generate a POE, which is called it's a post-occupancy evaluation. And what that is we wanted to go back to the users and we wanted to ask the questions, you've used school for now 3 or 4 years, what can we work on? What's working in relation to security, layout, sound, multiple, let's say classroom layouts, collaborative spaces, library layout. And so August, September, we generated a survey and we shared that with the users at the school, including Ms. Kopak. So we might have, I think, maybe a half a dozen teachers and also Ms. Kopak and also some admin. We got that information back, we went through it, and then we also followed up probably another month or 2 later with some phone interviews. And we got on the phone. This is including our what we call the LPA Red, which is heavily involved with the POEs in California. And so we reached out to a lot of the users and asked questions about the usage of their building. What can we do better? What works? What doesn't work in relation to the school? We also went through probably, maybe about 2 months ago, John, we met. I wanted to meet also, especially when Julio was retiring. I wanted to take advantage of talking to Julio, also Keith, Nick, and also John and Stevie in relation to a POE for custodial, for maintenance, that is also maintenance in relation to site maintenance, and also material maintenance, the materials within the site itself, and then also the MEP. MEP was really, really important in relation to any issues that Julio's come across in relation to that school. And so in relation to the mechanical units, the plumbing fixtures, and everything else that relates to that. So we've now gathered this information, and then we presented this to Mr. Toscano and John and Stevie probably about 2 months ago. And so now we've gathered all this information. And so even though we are proceeding with the sort of the layout of Tradition in relation to the perimeter layout, we will begin to work on the interiors in relation to what the users have told us in relation to what works and what doesn't work. So that process is starting, and so we'll be able to hopefully better the school itself in relation to the layout. As you can see, we're using the same layout as tradition, and I think the district is going to move forward on that, but again, we talked about making things better in relation to our POE. We've looked at factors. We went through several options in relation to the direction of the school. We feel this is the optimal one in relation to several things. One is the stack space. So we heard at tradition there was issues with the parent stack space in relation to pickup. Also separating the parent and the bus as much as you can in relation to Greytown Road. We only have one entrance, not like tradition that has 1346 and 1518. We only have Greytown Road. So it's important for us safety-wise to separate those as much as we can. In relation to bus pickup, stack space for both cafeteria and the gym, and then general layout in relation to kids layout, portable layout, utilizing the entire site to its maximum in relation to the layout. And so we went through several options, turning the building this way, turning the building that way, and we came across this as being, we feel like, the best option. We are going to continue to tweak this. We have now shared this with our civil engineer. They will start designing the detention pond, and we are hoping to slide that entire building to the north, to the right. That will give us more stack space on the left, and we'll be able to utilize that area. But this utilizes not only the stack space that we've talked about, and you can see parent drop off on the top left, they take a right, go all the way down, and then they do a loop back around. So we'll provide a lot of stack space there. And then we'll be able to follow in the grades, which will work a lot better. This all is dollars. We're trying to minimize our dollars in relation to this site. So, and then also the flood zone. We did this, as you know, tradition is a kind of entire loop that goes around. As long as we get our fire hose layout in relation to the coverage of the building, we are good. And we feel like we're fairly close in relation to just stopping and starting that drive. And so we feel very, very good about this layout. Again, we're going to continue to tweak it, and we're going to try and make sure that we cross every bridge in relation to layout. And so this is where we're at right now, and we'll continue to work on it. Okay, schedule. As Mr. Toscano said, in relation to also the information we just told about, where we're starting early on the middle school north to meet the demographics that Roland had said in relation to tradition and the North Elementary School. So this schedule, I won't go through everything, but mainly the elementary school, which is the first one, we are starting early on the middle school north so that we can better that time frame of the demographics on the north end, because I think it was 2023, I believe it was. And so we're trying to work on that to help. So the intent would be that we would start early, have documents ready. When the bond passes, we would have drawings out on the streets, if that's just the way the district goes. And then we would try and hit the summer of 2024. In relation to the elementary schools, the middle schools, we've addressed a lot of those in relation to staggering the schedule to meet not only construction, but also to meet the demographics that have been generated for the middle school, which is in 2026. And then also the elementary school south, which is also 2026. The other ones, we're trying to hit optimal locations of summer work, layout of beginning where we feel like we can have mid-year openings, like let's say the CTC building. But most of them are hitting the summers, whether that's 2024 or 2025, okay? Okay. Cost, and I have presented this, I did our initial presentation prior to the bond, and then I came back in January and I provided an update in relation to schedule and cost.
Carlos, can you go back just
Yes,
before we
sir.
start getting into the projected cost? Go back to the schedule for a moment. I want to point something out.
Go back.
The board, Mr. Maska may want to say something about this as well. But if you'll recall in the last
Scroll up.
bond, a couple of the problems that the community wanted us to solve was warehouse, the fact that we were leasing the warehouse. And so in that project program was the construction of a new warehouse. There was also an aged, inadequate ECPD headquarters. And so the solution was to build a warehouse, ECPD headquarters in one building with EC headquarters being in front of the house. We also know that we're gonna have to expand our bus fleet to service almost double the population in the next 2 years, and one of the solutions was to renovate base one and add a couple of service bays. Since then, that particular area where the bus transportation facility is, base one, because of the increased traffic on Sulphur Springs, that's become a safety concern. We got Officer Johnson here today, and we're doing a traffic impact study. We've seen an increased number of accidents and serious accidents. We're having a hard time getting our buses out of there. And parents, buses coming out of South Campus is a problem. Parents and students leaving the high school and going to the high school is a problem. And so it's a safety concern, number one. So we went through an exercise of looking at, if we were to build a centralized base one, say off Highway 87 somewhere, and retrofit the existing transportation facility into a warehouse and police department, what would that cost look like? And it actually would be more cost effective for the district to do that, with more potential to expand that transportation facility in the future to address growth. And it eliminates a growing safety concern right there. So in here today, Carlos is just going to reference that, and we'll talk to the community about that on the 27th. But that's the only subtle difference. In addition to, we'll talk a little bit about heritage and legacy. We know that Heritage had some major issues with the restrooms. The fact that we couldn't get started on that construction, and the fact that we're not going out until November, we have to budget to get those restrooms done locally. We can't wait for a bond to pass to get those things done. So the scope of what we may end up presenting to the community for their consideration at Heritage is going to be reduced, because we're gonna have to move money around and just get those projects done through capital improvement projects. So those are the only subtle changes. Everything else that we're gonna start with the community next week is exactly as it was in 2021. Does that make sense? Okay.
No,
Yes, sir.
no, just to elaborate on what we're talking about, Roland and I talked about, it was that the bus garage that we have here, which is built in 85, and what we have, how many schools we have at 85? We high school, one junior high.
We had the 2 junior highs, but we also had, we had a couple new elementaries since then, and a junior high.
So instead of spending, just renovating that, and really when we're done renovating, it wasn't really gonna be adequate to what the size of the district is taking that facility, instead of getting rid of an asset, modifying that asset into a warehouse and for a police department, and then finding a location for a new bus garage, a base camp bus garage, basically, that would take us into another 25 to 30 years on another site, and alleviate the traffic problem that's creating here, and go to a 4-lane main divided highway, which is more suited for higher traffic. So that's why we started discussing that.
I like how we're still gonna utilize the,
Yeah, we wouldn't be getting rid of an asset.
yeah,
We would,
for sure. I like
Repurpose
that
it.
idea,
yeah,
repurpose it.
Hey,
Wait a minute.
Now, Roland said bus and police was gonna be in the same,
No.
building. What did you say?
Warehouse.
Warehouse.
Warehouse and
Did you
police.
say that?
It would be warehouse on the back end, so the
Right.
maintenance bays would be renovated and retrofitted into becoming our warehouse.
Okay,
So we were gonna build like a 14,000 square foot building that was warehouse, and the front of the house was gonna be ECPD.
okay.
That's a 16,000 square foot building, and so we just retrofit the front of the house, which is offices now, into ECPD, and the back would be warehouse. So basically accomplish the same thing, but instead of building a warehouse ECPD, we'll build a new transportation facility and retrofit the existing transportation facility. And the net difference is it's actually more cost effective to do that and relieves the traffic. And the back of the bus garage is about 2.5 or 3 acres of parking for buses. That opens up real estate for additional parking or additional facilities at the high school. So it just gives us more flexibility at a lower overall cost, and eliminates that choke point, which has just gotten out of hand with the increased traffic on Sulphur Springs. So that's just the concept. Of course, we'll have to run it by the community and see what they think.
Okay.
But I just wanted the board to know that those are some of the changes since, we've been working on this. So this north site acquisition and what Carlos presented, and then those other subtle adjustments.
I love it.
Yes,
The traffic is terrible.
it is. Are you, can we ask questions on this, or do you wanna wait till the end?
We can ask questions.
So the detention pond, is it gonna stay on site?
Yes,
I know it's a dumb question, but, so can we maybe utilize that for learning, or is it,
So it's not it wouldn't always have water, so like at
Okay,
the
gotcha.
front, like across from 4 Points is a detention pond at Tradition now, and it never actually has water in it.
Okay.
But it's management of runoff to
okay.
make sure that it's not flowing any faster into neighboring properties.
gotcha,
So
yeah, that was my main concern,
Yeah.
was safety, but I also wanted to see if we could,
Yeah.
okay.
And so what Carlos mentioned earlier is that's still gotta be engineered, and it's possible that the detention pond could be narrower,
Mm-hmm,
and maybe even an L shape to go underneath the parking area. And what it'll do is allow that whole site plan to move towards the north, if you will, and more get closer to centering that piece of property, which gives you on the, whatever that is, plan south, it'll allow you to play with that stack space, because the biggest thing we hear from parents is never enough stack space to get all the traffic off the road, which is why we've done the improvements at Sinclair,
Yeah, yeah.
and why we're proposing the same things over at Highland Forest and Oak Crest. And then separating the buses from the parents. If you could separate them, it also tends to be a much safer condition. And so those are just the concepts that are on the design, and then you can see at the very bottom, next to the play field on the left, that's for future portables, which is exactly where the portables are at Tradition now. And then you have all the play areas, pre-K on the south, and then over in the floodplain area, you can see, you can't build structure or roads or anything like that on floodplain, but they can be playing fields. And the floodplain doesn't mean there's standing water, only when there's major rain, so we got plenty of field with that layout. And still some formal design work to be done. But the new element, using the Tradition plan, it allows us to accelerate the design process,
sure,
and it's definitely some cost savings as well.
yeah, I agree.
And minus the user's feedback, it's been a very, very positively received facility. Minus the design adjustments we'll need to make based on the user's feedback, we think the community really feels good about that plan.
For sure. I like the savings on the design.
Yeah, I also
The
wanted to, I'm sorry, Claudia. Go
No, you're
ahead,
good.
sorry. I also wanted to add, during our POE with Keith, he had mentioned that Tradition, they have all of their maintenance, like their lawnmowers, as they stay on site. They're actually stored in the small building that's at the adjacent transportation facility. And so I think it's probably easier rather than to have to move it, back and forth. So I didn't mention there are 3-4 existing structures on this bottom left. I don't know what the conditions are, but we are going out there this coming Wednesday, and we are walking the site. And so there may be opportunities to use maybe 1 or 2 of those buildings to house these maintenance equipment that we use. It's in a perfect location. We don't have to do too much adjustments. One thing I'd like to do is see if we can get an entrance into the play area so they can run their lawnmowers at the bottom as well, rather than having to go all the way around. So we're gonna be working on this. Hopefully there's a structure too that is in good shape that I think we can take advantage of using that as a maintenance facility, if possible. Other than that, and then also, I don't know what's gonna happen down, it'll be something that Mr. Toscano will have to address, but there's actually a cul-de-sac down here at Katzer. I don't know if it kind of sort of splits in the cutting of line, I guess you would say, for the parent drop-off, but you can see here, that Katzer does have a dead end there, right there. You see that? And so I don't know if they're gonna come to you guys and ask about that, but that'll be something that y'all will have to address. Okay.
And then that floodplain's the 100-year floodplain, correct? And
Yes, ma'am.
when was that last done?
That's a good question. I think they've done a fairly recent survey out there.
Okay,
It's a creek.
well,
South,
creeks can restrict.
well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it's called, Saltatio or something? I'm not sure.
yeah, I think it's all too.
I can find that out
Okay.
for you.
Awesome,
But,
thank you.
yes, and I can find out how soon that survey was done. Okay. Oh, this is gonna cut it off. Let me go this way. Okay. As you all recall, I did come back, post-bond in January to provide an updated cost estimate and where the market was. I told you all the things that were being bid in relation to school districts. I wanted to make sure that I showed you this slide again. The cost that I'm going to show you, the total cost, includes everything. Turnkey construction cost, soft cost, which is all of your building permitting, your design fees, your surveying, etc. Your FF&E, all your furniture, all of your technology, and also all of your contingencies. So it's a turnkey dollar amount in relation. Sometimes districts pull out their own FF&E, and they'll either do it under a fund balance, but in this, the numbers that we're providing to y'all, this is a turnkey in relation to all of these items. Okay. Again, in January, I came to you guys and I talked about this is just an example of the elementary school. And so the 2021, we had projected about 37 million, again, the turnkey. We came back, showed y'all, we addressed at that point that the market was going up. Everything was going up. In relation to also all the projects that come out. I think probably half of them passed in May. There were some that did not, but the major ones was Northside ISD, which is $1 billion bond, and then all of the things in relation to SISD. At this point right now, we don't know what's going on. Everything it's just volatile, everything is unpredictable, the market is unpredictable. You guys hear everything in relation to inflation, fuel costs. It's just an unknown. I reached out to 3 general contractors, their estimators, Joris, Barlacock, and F.A. Nunley. And they all told me the same thing. They don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 to 10 months. Whether it's a recession, things back up, whether the inflation comes down, we just don't know. What I've come to y'all and presented is what we're assuming is the worst case scenario, we're hoping. We're going to try and adjust this. But we don't know if it's going to continue. We don't know if it's going to get even worse than this. We're just trying to, it's a square footage cost in relation to what we feel the market is at. And so right now, going back to the elementary school, again, we were at 45, we are projecting about 52 million. That is roughly about $415 a square foot. This includes 6% inflation, probably 0.5% per month, including probably about a 10 to 15% inflation in the last 3 or 4 months. It's just gotten bad. And also to add to that, we don't have any examples. What really is big right now is the SAISD projects, but it's apples and oranges. Those are big sort of retrofits to the campuses. I did talk to Mike Mullahan over at F.A. Nunley. They are bidding the last project at Medina Valley for an elementary school in July the 12th. So we will hopefully have a better idea of where the numbers are. The previous number, that was addressing the 2 elementary schools at Comal that had bid, and then the Northside project. Hopefully, it will be where we're assuming is what's, maybe in 360, 380, 400, but we just don't know. And I believe there's a new middle school that will be bid for Comal ISD. I don't know the timing of that. So this is where we, again, I think we just don't know. This is our sort of worst case scenario. We're assuming we're going to continue to work on this. We're going to see where some of these bids are at. We'll continue to reach out. Materials are pretty tough right now. Steel has come down, but all of your cover board for roof you can get for 35, 40 weeks. Mechanical units, 35, 40 weeks. A lot of the electrical, it is difficult to get right now. So what that also has caused is it's also caused construction schedule to extend even further. I had it at like 16 to 17 months now on elementary schools. That is because they're having to wait for material. We're having this now at Somerset ISD with the Performing Arts Center. We're having to wait on material. And so we're going to continue to work on this number. This is just kind of our first draft of what we feel it just at this market time right now, where things are at right now. We have a great relationship with the contractors we talked about, and we'll continue to try and see if these numbers change. So I'll probably be back to hopefully give you some better news. But for right now, you know, this again is just a square footage cost. We don't have any information on any true numbers in relation to bids.
So these numbers are based on if we went and called for a bond to go out in November, correct?
That is correct.
What do you think percentage of change would be if next May?
So, and that's a great question. What happens, we've projected this inflation about a year. It's 6%, we're thinking about 0.5% per month. So these numbers are projecting only the projects that are going to be bid within the year. We don't know when we bid, I think there's only maybe the middle school and probably the elementary school that will extend to about a 2-year bidding time frame. So from that 1 year to 2 years, we don't know what the market is going to do. There's no way that I can project that at all. So what I'm getting at is, John, is that we're projecting from now for about a year, so hopefully we're in good stances in January if we bid the first elementary school for a year. But if it's bidding 2 years down the road, then we don't know what that inflation is going to be. So that projection is about a year. So we would, I mean, it's just hard right now. It's just so hard to understand where things are going. So I want to be as truthful as I can with you guys and be as direct. So that is all that I have.
So once the bids are accepted and we move forward, those are set prices, correct? They can't, have you heard of any, I guess, companies adding a what if or a cushion in their?
They will add it, it just depends. They already know to add it in the bid.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay,
there may be a
yeah,
10 or 15% premium. And I just had this at Somerset. They came back to me and said, hey, we got subs that are saying they want another $200,000 because from when they assumed their projections were, and now has changed so much that they're
That's what I'm
paying
afraid
more,
of, yeah.
they're paying more. So, you know, it's hard. I won't accept that. I can't prove that because that's their risk at a certain point. I understand, but it's their risk.
So in situations like that, is the work still done, or what happens if?
Yeah,
you
it's a
don't pay the-
GMP, it's a GMP,
Okay.
once they're signed contract, I mean, it's,
Okay,
I don't think, legally, they can't go back and
Yeah.
address, making the district pay for that.
okay,
You'll probably get charged especially now, it'll be a lot, and that's where that number comes into play. That's why, because it's gonna be a 20, 30, 40% premium
yeah,
on everything.
that's what I figured.
It's,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
yeah, it's tough.
It's, yeah, it is
just
tough.
really difficult right now.
Can we add this to the bond, I guess, presentation? I mean, is it, or it's, I just think this is very important for the community to see. I mean, I know they're aware, but this is just,
Yeah, so the community group that will come together next week will get all of this same information. And then we're also going to do some reaching out to the community through a formalized survey to make sure that everybody in the community has an opportunity to give us some feedback, to hear about the things that are being considered on the bond, and to let us know where their tolerances are. And so we can share that with the committee as well, before the committee decides what recommendations to pass forward to the board.
yeah, I'm just afraid the longer we wait, I mean, nobody's getting raises and everything's going up, and a lot of our senior citizens are on a fixed thing. I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer, I'm just trying to be real, realistic. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you for that information, Carlos, good job.
We knew it was coming, we
No, I-
just,
Yeah,
thank you all.
thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
right, so the market, the conditions have changed financially as well. Obviously, we all got our property tax bills, and our values went through the roof, as has everyone, so that affects Victor's presentation today. So while we're seeing escalation in that regard, it's also affecting our financial position. Hard for me to use the word to the good, but the tax impact, even though this is a lot more expensive, isn't necessarily following the same trajectory it did last time. So you'll see as Victor presents some scenarios here what I mean. So you have a couple of handouts from Specialized Public Finance. One's a little thicker than the other.
Yes. We'll go over the big one.
The big one, okay. Thank you.
Honorable President, members of the board, Mr. Toscano, thank you for having me here again. For the record, my name is Victor Quiroga, and we have the honor of representing you as your financial advisor. And so, yes, the presentation that I'm first referencing here is the preliminary bond program scenarios. It's 18 pages, but I don't anticipate walking through the full 18 pages. I'll show you a few summary slides that we prepared for you just to let you know where we stand right now in terms of the bond market, interest rates, your property values, and how that impacts your continued planning for a potential bond program, what the cost is going to be for that. And so, I'll just scroll down here. So the first thing we wanted to cover with you, and this is the first page after the cover sheet, it's a graph. This is a graph that you've seen before. This is a look at the municipal bond interest rate environment. So whenever we're, we see the news and the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates because they're trying to combat inflation, that does impact municipal bonds, but it's not directly tied to each other. So the Federal Reserve, what they're talking about these short-term interest rates where banks borrow between each other on a daily basis. The interest rates that we see on the municipal bond side for our Texas School District clients is more the long-term interest rates. You know, what are bond interest rates going to be doing, and what can I lock in for the next 25 to 30-year period? And so, but nevertheless, those interest rates are going up, and also we've seen here pretty dramatically during this current calendar year that bond interest rates have been going up quite a bit too. And so this is a graph looking at the index that we use over the last 10 years. You can see here since 2020, they spiked up during COVID. You can see there between 19 and 20 towards the right, you see that spike that happened. Then that started relaxing, and then since that time, we're at really historically low interest rate environments. And so we took advantage of that. We did a refinancing at one point, saved taxpayers some money. But you can see on the right side, they have started to go up pretty quickly. We knew they were going to go up. We just didn't realize they're going to go up this quickly. But I think this gets us a little bit back to the average. I started this in this industry about 21 years ago, and this is kind of what we were seeing back then, these type of interest rates. So just to let you know that has changed a little bit. And so just to talk a little bit about, as a school district, what we can afford, we look at bond capacity, and this is the next slide here. When we look at bond capacity, what we can afford as Texas School District, we're limited to how much we could borrow and issue in debt on behalf of the taxpayers, and this is what we call the 50-cent test or the AG test. And basically what this is that the Attorney General, the process is we ask the voters for permission to issue debt, they give us that permission, then it's up to the board on when and how to issue that debt. But when we issue that debt, the final authority is going to be the Texas Attorney General's office. And so they run a test and say, they look at our INS tax rate, they're going to look at our existing debt that we have on the books, and then they're going to look at how much we're going to add on for these new bonds. And if that tax rate calculates up to 50 cents or higher, then they want to approve the new bonds. The thing is that when we look at this, we could only use your current year's property values. We can't use any type of projections on that. So it makes it a little bit tough to issue, or to look at. But that's the big restriction that we work with as a school district when we're trying to issue bonds. Right now, our interest and sinking fund tax rate is 21.6 cents per $100 valuation. So we have about 28 cents there that we could potentially work with if you want to address and move forward with the new bond program. The next slide here, this is the bond repayment structure. This is something that we visited with you back in January of this year after the failed November election of 2021, just to see, well, are there other structures that we could look at to potentially try to mitigate and minimize the tax impact that the voters are going to be looking at when they're looking at these bond programs. So there's multiple ones, but these are the more popular ones. So the first one is a level debt payment structure. And so this is just like bonds are pretty much like mortgage, it's a debt. And so whenever, if I go and get a 30-year mortgage, I know that for the next 30 years on a monthly basis, and if I get a fixed interest rate, my monthly payments are going to be about the same each year for the next 30 years. And so the same thing with bonds, we call this a level debt structure. And so this one had been very traditional and very conservative. It's going to, over the life of that debt, it's going to cause the lowest interest cost over the 30-year life. However, it really pays no regard to like the interest rate. Typically, this type of structure is going to have the highest tax rate impact on your taxpayer. And so there's another debt structure that we could look at to see how much can we borrow now and try to maximize that so we could address your projects, but how can we minimize the initial tax impact on your current taxpayers? So this might be something that you may want to consider because we're in a unique position here at East Central ISD in that we know that we have a lot of residential growth occurring, and that's going to occur over the next number of years. So the structured debt service, what this is that I do defer some of the payments out into the later years, and what that results in is that the taxpayers initially, that tax impact is going to be as high as that first level debt service structure. What we're doing here is we're purposely kind of spreading out that debt obligation of these new bonds so that the people that are coming in the future by building these new homes are also going to share in this bond program that they're going to be benefiting from in the future. So it's a little bit more of a fair way to distribute that tax burden to all of the taxpayers, including the future taxpayers. So this is just a structure that we could utilize to minimize the initial tax impact on today's taxpayers. So we ran multiple analysis. Administration wanted us to look at various borrowing amounts. And so this is something that also changed. Carlos isn't the only one that changed things. So when I was here visiting with you back in January, all the numbers that I showed you back then, I was assuming that a 30-year bond, we could lock in a 3% interest rate on that bond. Right now, I'm being still conservative here. Back in January, if we were to sell a 30-year bond, realistically, we'd probably be in the 2% interest rate. So what I'm doing here with these numbers is I'm taking today's interest rates, which is probably in the low 4% range, and then I'm adding about a full percentage point. Because if you do either a November or a May bond program, we're still a few months out before you're actually issuing some of this debt. So again, what you see here is, in my opinion, I still think worst case scenario, but like Carlos, I really can't project too far because the interest rate market is also changing too. So what I'll do here is I won't go through all the numbers, but just to make it easier, and there's also a handout there, it might be easier in your eyes. So we'll just look at the $250 million bond program, which is on the far right there. So you can see there in the top box, this is a level debt service structure, something that, again, traditional payment, but it's going to cause the highest tax rate increase initially. So you can see here, let's just say we did a $250 million bond. We issued that August of 2023, about a year out. We're going to do a 30-year repayment term. The interest rate that I'm projecting here is 5.11%. You can see there the total principal and interest payment that we would have to pay back over the 30-year life. Again, the current INS tax rate right now is 21.6 cents per $100 valuation. If we were to use this level repayment term, we would have to increase our INS tax rate by about 15.4 cents. So our INS tax rate would go from 21.6 to 37 cents per $100 valuation. So that's for a $250 million bond program. That's a level repayment term. And again, it's not to say that we're going to do this, but this is just to show you some examples here. So what if we did the structured debt service where I'm purposely trying to structure your new bonds to try to minimize that tax impact on today's taxpayers. We'll do a $250 million bond program. We'll sell it at the same time. The interest rate will be about the same, about 5.12% for planning purposes here. We'll take our 21.6 cent INS tax rate, and instead of 15-cent growth or impact initially on today's taxpayers, we're looking at about a 10-cent growth. And so this is kind of the power of the structured bond program that we could potentially utilize. One thing to consider too here is that, we're showing you what the impact would be, the principal and interest over the 30-year period. But just be mindful that pretty much all the time, after you pay maybe the first 10 years of payments, these bonds are going to be eligible to be refinanced, and historically, you don't end up paying that full dollar amount that we're showing you there under the full debt service. So, but again, we just wanted to show you some examples here. So, $250 million bond program, level debt, increase of a tax rate would be 15.4 cents versus a structured debt is 10 cents. So about a 5 penny difference there, which could make a difference. So one thing to keep in mind that I am still using conservative interest rates. These are just for planning purposes. We believe that we're still using a relatively conservative property value growth that we're trying to get as realistic as possible in the next couple of years, because we are seeing some pretty tremendous growth, not only here, but in other districts in the area. And also, more importantly, all this tax increase that I'm talking about here, if folks have the over 65 homestead exemption on their property plus 20 acres, they won't feel the impact of a new bond program. And we like to say that because they tend to be the most active voting demographic for any school district. Are there any questions on this summary page here? Well, if you're really interested and you have a magnifying glass, if you continue going to the next slides, there's the actual detailed model. What I showed you was just the summary page of each one. But these are all the models. We look at your property value growth. One thing I would like to say is that for these models and where we're calculating this, we're assuming two things. One is that we're assuming that our property values that will be certified next month are going to be an increase of about 20% from this current year that we're in right now. We're assuming that it's going to increase another 20%. Then after that, I'm backing it off, and I'm backing it off pretty drastically. This is just my conservative planning that I like to use. I'm assuming that it's just going to grow 5% per year for the next couple of years, and then I'm dropping it down to 1%. So again, the tax impact that we're showing you here, most likely than not, may not be that high, but just for planning purposes, and when you go and start talking to the community, you might want to show them these, what I believe are worst case scenarios in terms of tax impact to them. So again, all the numbers that you saw, these are the individual models. The second thing that these models incorporate is the next presentation that we have for you regarding defeasance, or the way the district is going about managing its INS tax rate.
Sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
Victor. On the level debt service scenario, you said similar to a mortgage, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it distributes the tax burden, so will that rate, I guess 37-cent increase in I&E will stay the same throughout the life of?
No, that's a great question, and that'll give me an excuse to look at the debt service model here. We'll just, and again, this might be a little small on the screen, but you might want to see on your handouts there. So I'll just go to page 7 on your model, just to look at the debt service, the level debt structure. You could see there the On column F, that's a $100 million bond program on this slide here, slide 7. You can see there annually, the debt service payment or principal and interest payment per year is about the same at $6.6 million per year, and that's going to stay the same. You see how it doesn't really change over a 30-year period. But what does change is the fact in column D, our existing debt that we have on the books, it's right now it's $9.5 million, and it's going to decrease to 8.1 in 2028. Then it's going to decrease to 4.8 million in 2034, and then it's going to come off the books in 2042. So all that matters here when we look at the INS tax rate. If you look at column L there, currently it's 21.6 cents. We're going to recommend that you keep it at 21.6 cents on purpose covered for next year. Then if we did, let's just say a $100 million bond, this is a 1.1 cent impact. That'll take it to 22.7, but then you see after that, your INS tax rate is going to start going down. And that's happening for 2 reasons, because we're paying off debt that we have on the books, and also our property values are growing over the years. So this is where I'm saying these numbers are still conservative, because I'm assuming that eventually it's just going to be a 1% growth, but we haven't really seen that in a long time. This is just for planning purposes here. We don't want to overpromise at this point. So this INS tax rate column there at L, it continues to drop as your property values grow, and so they might even be lower than what you're seeing here eventually. And so just to compare it real quick, if it's okay, I'll just go down to, I'll skip down to slide number 13. This is the structured debt service. You can see here what I'm doing. In column F, this is for a $100 million bond program for planning purposes or just discussion purposes. My annual payment is at $6.6 million per year for 30 years. I'm purposely trying to minimize the initial payments to try to minimize a tax impact. So you can see here on column L, I'm not requiring an actual increase. I'm assuming that we could, do $100 million, we could keep the INS tax rate at 21.6 cents, but eventually it's going to start going down as we pay off debt and also as we continue to grow the property values. So I'm sorry that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but so it's not going to stay that high forever in either of these scenarios. It's going to drop eventually as your property values continue to grow.
And your debt service continues.
Yes, sir.
Nice debt service. Okay, awesome, thank you, Victor.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions.
Who chooses the difference? Who chooses the structured versus the level?
It's really just a recommendation from the administration to y'all as you continue planning, and if you do decide to call an election, we'll have to obviously decide on an amount that we're going to ask the voters for. It could be 250, it could be 200, whatever you all end up deciding, and the committee decides. After that, then we'll come back to you with even more refined numbers to see now that we've identified a dollar amount that we want to ask the voters for, is there any other way where me and my staff could help you plan for that and try to minimize that tax impact? And so in all reality, this is assuming that we do, let's just say we did a $100 million bond in this case. This is assuming that we were to sell all those bonds all at once. Most of the time, that's probably not recommended, despite what the interest rates are doing out there, because you're not going to spend $100 million in 12 months. It's going to take you some time to work through these projects. So what many districts do that are looking at these larger projects is that they issue these bonds over time, and then what that does is that you could spread out the tax impact even more so. So again, these are more conservative numbers, worst case scenario numbers. But at the end of the day, it's y'all that decide what you want to present and how you want to plan for this bond.
Did that make sense?
Yes, and I
As
wish.
you'll remember in the bond program, the board had decided that we would optimize when we sold the bonds based on the scope of work that was being done in each of those years over the 3.5-year period. So this is assuming they all get sold at once.
Right.
So that is another
And you did a
way.
great job trying to convey that kind of stuff to the public. And I mean, I didn't come anywhere close to how you, but I mean, they don't get it.
Yeah, and that's why we run these. Yeah, that's why we run these numbers. A lot of
They just
times
hear
when
bond
some.
and no, tax
Yeah, and sometimes what some districts do is they just kind of, we prepare these worst-case scenario here, assuming that we sell it all at once, and that's the tax rate that you discuss with the voters. Central ISD has over the years, since we've been here, over 20 years, has addressed it differently. You might show them a range, it could be, 3 to 4 pennies, or you could give them an exact tax rate. The district has done it different ways in the past.
So it's passed along to that's the tax rate the taxpayers are paying, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I guess we should just let them know it's decreasing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but how?
But yeah, no, I
'Cause
get
He
it.
said it, but they don't get it. They're like,
It's not that they don't get it, it's just, I didn't understand a lot of this until I got on the school board. I mean, it's not that they don't get it, it's just, it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But we
right, I
have to-
mean, but they don't understand it
Right,
enough to where,
but we
that's
have
what I
to
mean
put
by
it
they don't
in-
get it. That we have to tell them, but you can't tell them
Right,
detail
right.
enough to
We just
where
have to
they
find a way to
understand it.
communicate
You
it,
have
and
to find a way.
Mr. Toscano does a good job with that,
He did a great job.
yeah.
But the structure and the level of debt, the structure would be more beneficial for the voters, am I right?
Yeah,
For
so,
the 10%, 10%.
10%, yes, sir.
Rather than the 15%.
yes, sir.
Yeah, it would be a lower tax impact over the life of the bonds. It would cost a little bit more in interest, but it would essentially structure the debt such that it spreads the burden out over time and actually kicks it down the road a little bit so that new residents moving into the district fully participate as well. And so folks that currently live in the community, the impact would be 10 cents instead of 15 cents, and then we would all share in that entire burden over the course of 30 years. So again, the fundamental difference, you can see if assuming we didn't refinance when they were callable, which we've never not taken advantage of that, but assuming we paid them the station to station for 30 years, the level debt at 250,000, you'd pay 250 million. We'd end up, the community would end up paying 495,207,000, right? Versus structured, which costs you a little less to every taxpayer up front.
We pay more.
It's gonna cost us a little bit
Right,
more
right.
over the life.
Right.
So there is a little bit of a trade-off
Right,
there.
But, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but, that's fine.
But it's a substantial difference in the tax rate. When you look at 175 million there, you're talking about half the tax rate. It's a substantial difference.
Yes.
We're good?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
One more thing for you here, and this is a lot shorter, so. Spare you guys here. So, when we were talking, and as your property values continue to grow pretty substantially, and we knew that we needed a plan for a bond, and this was even before November 2021, we spoke with the administration and said, there's a way to stabilize your INS tax rate. As you know, you have your two tax rates, your M&O and your INS. The M&O, we really don't have too much control of it. The state essentially tells us what our M&O needs to be based off of their state funding formulas. The INS tax rate, as it stands right now, we have a little bit more control of that. And so what many districts do, and what Central ISD started doing during this current fiscal year, is that we've implemented what we call the defeasance program. And defeasance, that's just our fancy bond terminology saying that we're paying off bonds early. But what this is just an INS tax rate management program, and this is only available to Texas school districts in that we could have an INS tax rate a little bit higher than what we need for that particular year's principal and interest payments that we have due to the bond investors. And what we do is that all that, the extra money that we're collecting from that tax rate, we're gonna use that during the fiscal year to start paying bonds off earlier. And so that benefits you two ways. You're able to shave off the interest costs that you owe on your bonds, like we talked about the 30 years. And it also generates additional bond capacity so that if you're thinking about a new bond, it's not going to cost you as much because you're paying off debt early on your other stuff and you're just able to replace it. So this does take board action, and so what you do is in August, when you adopt your budget and you adopt your tax rate, an agenda item before, just like we did last August, is that we approve a defeasance program where we say that we're going to keep our INS tax rate at 21.6 cents on purpose, even though we don't need it to be that at that level. And we're going to use the extra money. So during this current fiscal year, by us keeping the INS tax rate at 21.6 cents, we're able to collect about $1.3 million more than what we needed to pay off this year's debt service payments or principal and interest payments that are on the books. And so what we did with that a couple months ago is Ms. Burns and I, we set up an escrow account, and what we did is we were able to pay off about $1.19 million in principal early off your book. So we were able to do that. And that's not a refinancing, that's just sending cash and just paying off those bonds and just taking them off the books. And so what that did for your taxpayers is that it saved about $290,000 in future interest costs now that they don't have to pay because you paid off these bonds early. So based on the pretty substantial property tax value growth that we're seeing, potentially 20% when they're certified, if we continue to keep the INS tax rate at 21.6 cents, we'll probably collect about $3.3 million extra or excess collections. And so that'll allow us to pay off about $3.2 million in principal for this upcoming year. And then that'll save you an additional $1.16 million to your taxpayers. So the chart that you see here, the first line at the bottom there, that's something that we've already done, that's already been effectuated. And so we paid off $1.19 million in principal early. Interest cost savings to your taxpayers was $290,000. If we do the same thing again, we could probably pay off even more next year by keeping your INS tax rate at 21.6. And we'll pay off $3.19 million in principal early, and that'll get you another $1.16 million. So after a 2-year period, by keeping your INS tax rate the same, you're able to save your taxpayers about close to $1.4 to $1.5 million in interest cost savings. And again, you're not only saving in the interest, but you paid off $4.3 million in principal early, so that if you're planning a new bond, that's $4.38 million that you have essentially access to, where you don't have to increase your tax rate because it's already used to it. Any questions on that?
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
No, good. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good, thanks, Lee. Always good. Always good, yes.
Yeah, so just a reminder, trustees, on the 27th, we will be bringing that community group together next Monday, and we'll be sharing the majority of all this same information, getting some feedback, starting the conversations to get some direction. We're gonna launch a community-wide survey, which is gonna be something we've never done before. It's an attempt to also make sure that every citizen has a chance to interact with this information and give us some feedback about what they're willing to support, comfortable with, make sure they all understand it. We'll bring that data back to the committee in July, end of July, so that that committee can decide then to recommend to the board the direction that they think the board should consider in terms of a bond program.
It's a different timeline, obviously. We started in April,
Yeah, so we're at least at this point, we're gonna start with where that committee left off.
so because all the tours were made and everything was seen.
We're gonna
and-
start at that point and go from there. And of course, it'll all be up to the board ultimately, if we call for November election, May election, whatever the case may be, and whatever scope the board ends up feeling comfortable with at that particular time, ultimately.
There's really nothing changed in the bond. I mean, it's still the same. Only thing is costs went from 172 to $240 million. Basically, but it's basically the same when you say bond package, pretty much other than the bus garage, maybe potentially
Yeah, so again, we'll start with the community, with the conversation from there, and then see which direction it takes.
Where was this meeting be held at?
It'll be at Salado Elementary School.
And that's on the 27th. And voters will have, who's gonna present this information to them?
Myself,
And there'll be-
Mr.
Right,
Constantino,
that's what I'm saying.
Victor will be there.
And so
yes, sir.
they will take questions from.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a board meeting.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, yeah.
It's not a board meeting.
I understand, yeah, but I'm just
So if
saying,
everybody on board of trustees don't show up, because then we'll have them at, so.
well, yeah, I know about the board, but I wanted,
Can I go in
I wanted them
cognito?
to be able to ask
Yes,
questions.
sir, yes, sir.
Because that's the biggest thing,
Yes,
they
sir.
wanna ask questions.
Yeah, it'll be
And then you
interactive.
could explain it to them,
Mhm.
and, you know, and really,
And I think, so they'll have a whole month then from that meeting to the subsequent meeting, you know, for any of those that want more information or wanna visit some sites, or any of those sorts of things, but what we're really hoping for is that the survey's gonna invite almost 20,000 citizens. These are all the folks that we have as registered voters in our community.
okay,
So we're gonna reach out to every one of them and give them options for phone interviews and conversations, for
okay, okay.
text survey responses, for web-based survey responses. We're sending letters to their house,
Okay. that's
you know,
okay.
inviting them to engage.
Mhm.
And we wanna bring all that information back to the committee so they have their own point of view in their work together as a committee. They're also gonna be building upon the previous committee's 3.5 months worth of work. They'll also have the community's feedback, and then they'll be able to decide what they're comfortable with
Okay.
presenting to the board and when.
Mhm. And, this invite, you've got RSVP on that?
Yes, sir. So
And how many we're talking?
between 50 and 60 confirmed. We're waiting on a,
50,
a
60,
few.
that's confirmed, okay.
yep, and the
okay.
folks that were unable to make it, we've asked them, so for example, if we invited an HOA, we've asked them if the president couldn't go to invite somebody to represent that community.
Community, okay.
City council, same thing. We invited the mayor. If they can't make it, send a member.
Send a
We
member,
can make
okay.
it. Any of the boosters, you know, if you can't make it, send somebody to represent that organization.
District 2 also,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yep.
So-
Okay, so we
So
can,
we,
So what we're looking at here is the rejection that we got is gonna cost $70 million.
Yep,
Pretty much?
yep, that's exactly what it is.
Went from 175 to 240, it's 65.
yes, sir.
So by 3,000 people voting, that's what it amounted to. It cost the community, it will cost, if we get this approved, it'll cost the community $65 million
Mhm.
Sir.
because they didn't act back then.
Sir.
Put that out there, get rocks thrown at you.
Mhm. But it's
But
facts.
It's a reality
Yes.
because the voters didn't participate. And it's not gonna cost us 65 more because people didn't react to it. And the ones that did said, heck no. Like she says, they see an increase, oh, heck no.
But it's our job to get the
True,
voters
I
out.
understand,
mean,
I understand.
people don't
I-
vote anymore.
I understand. What I'm saying is the reality of what happened last time.
No, I agree.
Is that
Yeah.
because not enough people saw the benefit of what we're asking them to do, to give us authority to do, to build these schools that are needed, is gonna cost the community another 65. And if we lag again, it's gonna go up.
And that's
Even
our
more.
job to educate,
Absolutely.
educate.
Oh, yeah, oh, I
our
understand
community,
that.
our constituents
Yeah,
of the
so what he's
increase.
talking about is very, very, very
Well, we
necessary.
the bond
and
only
people
fell
need to
by a few
react.
votes, am I right?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, man.
Chuck, we thought of
You
doing
only
a
lose
town
by
hall.
1 point, but you know.
Yeah, I know, but still, you ain't got convinced, you ain't got convinced but a
The
couple
loss
of,
is a loss.
convinced just a couple of folks, man, that's
We
not the way I
had,
look
we
at
had
it.
like
You ain't gotta
10
be,
town halls.
hell, some people's already on
Like
they
board.
were-
15.
Lot of
No, I'm
people
just-
on board.
No, but I'm saying one centralized town hall. I mean, I know Mr. Toscano did a lot of work informing the community, but I'm saying one town hall meeting, give everyone the opportunity to attend and,
We had the PAC, PTA, boosters, there were like 5, 6 different groups, big groups. There was probably 12 people there. People don't show
We're
up to
definitely,
get the
uh,
information,
So
but then they
the
wanna
survey
complain
is
about it.
one
I agree.
approach in addition, and we're also gonna do, you know, we didn't do as much print. And we
Mhm.
relied on a lot of
but then
digital.
that's gonna cost us more, that's the thing,
We-
it's like,
we have to get
no, I
information.
agree, I agree.
And,
It's
you know,
just-
walking neighborhoods, walking communities, you know,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
gonna have conversations out
Oh,
there in the
wow.
community, and, that's, you know, we didn't have as many people in the community come to us, and we would have to go to them as well, so we're gonna have
We
to
just need
use.
to do a better job of communicating this.
Yeah.
especially-
And are we able to, like, walk the community and
Yeah, you can.
I'll pull you in a wagon, coach?
I don't think they have no problem with you walking the community.
But at the end of the day, it's like Victor said, it's not getting any cheaper.
You
No.
walk.
So,
And we could have already broke ground on one, we wouldn't have had portable buildings at our newest campus.
Yeah, because that's another, and it costs.
that's another $500,000
Yeah.
a job.
Yeah.
So,
So is there any
So-
way we could, like, communicate that as well? The added cost of having to go back out, plus,
We've
What it's
already
gonna cost?
communicated that.
okay, but I think we need to, like, drill it in their heads. I'm not trying to be rude or ugly.
No, you're
I
right,
think we're
you're
just,
right,
we need
but
to kindly
everybody
drill
has
it
to
in their
do it.
heads and make them realize how much more it's gonna cost.
yes.
Well,
Cost all of us, cause I mean, it's gonna affect
I felt
us.
like I could say it in my sleep the whole bond program.
Anyway,
anyway, there you go.
Yeah,
I
anyway,
felt like I was
Alright.
saying it.
getting all riled
We're
up,
not
sorry.
trying-
got a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
so,
All right, we're done.
second.